According to the Buddhist understanding of the world, this lifetime, where we have been born as a human being, is not the first time we have been born in this world, and probably not the last. We keep on being born, dying, and being reborn in different life forms, fortunate or unfortunate, until we can understand the reality of the world, become dispassionate concerning our attachment to the world, and finally strive to do good deeds in order to break free from the cycle of rebirth altogether. The word Buddha is a term we use to refer to someone like us who devotes themselves to the intense practice of good deeds continuously over the course of many lifetimes as a pioneer to discover the quickest way to enlightenment in order to break free from the cycle of existence. Once a Buddha has become enlightened through his teachings, others too will learn how to become enlightened, breaking free from the cycle of existence too, for as long as his teachings are still remembered in the world. For the Buddha we know in our present era called Buddha Gautama, the ambition to strive for enlightenment as a Buddha started long ago, in a lifetime when he was a pauper who survived a shipwreck, but strived to swim with his mother on his shoulders to reach a shore he could not see. After 7 days in the ocean, the suffering of his existence inspired him to make the resolve, if only I can find a way to reach enlightenment, I'll teach others to reach enlightenment too. If only I can free myself from the cycle of existence, I will teach others to free themselves too. If only I can escape from this suffering, I will teach others to escape from suffering too. Making such a vow marked a change in destiny for this young man. From that time onwards, the young man has been referred to as the Bodhisattva, or the being in search of enlightenment. From that time forth, the Bodhisattva persevered continuously in cultivating 10 sorts of intense good deeds, which are referred to as perfections. The 10 sorts of perfection which he emphasized were generosity, self-discipline, renunciation, wisdom, perseverance, patience, truthfulness, resolution, loving-kindness, and equanimity. In the beginning, he was willing to part with wealth of any price in order to cultivate these good deeds to transform himself for the better. Later, he wouldn't stop short even of sacrificing his health or his life in order to cultivate good deeds to the utmost. In his second-to-last lifetime, the lifetime before he took human birth and became enlightened as the Buddha, the Bodhisattva arose as the king of the angels of the 4th level of heaven named Sandusita. He was invited by angels from 100,000 world systems to arise for the final time in the human realm. When he arose in the world, he was conceived to Queen Maya, the wife of King Suddhodana, the ruler of the Sakya kingdom in present-day northwest India. When his mother was nearing the end of her 10-month pregnancy, according to tradition, Queen Maya set out on a long journey back to her hometown of Devadaha in present-day Nepal, intending to give birth there. However, before she could arrive safely home, her time came as she was passing the Lumbini Grove in the Himalayan foothills. There, she rested beneath the Sala tree and gave birth to a son on the full moon day of the 6th lunar month of the year 623 BCE. The Bodhisattva's final birth was immaculate, with none of the usual unpleasantness associated with childbirth, and the child's body exhibited all 32 signs of a great man, as a result of the perfections the Bodhisattva had cultivated over the course of countless lifetimes. The special strength of the Bodhisattva's body allowed him to take 7 paces immediately after birth and proclaim, "I am chief in the world, eldest am I in the world. Foremost am I in the world. This is my last birth. There will be no further rebirth for me. After the birth of her son, Queen Maya immediately returned to Kapilavastu, and the news of the long-awaited heir spread far and wide, causing rejoicing throughout the country. There was a hermit who was a chaplain to the royal family and known to them as Galadevin or Asita. As soon as he knew the Bodhisattva had been born, he visited the royal palace. Seeing the prince exhibited all 32 marks of a great man, he paid homage at the prince's feet. He then prophesied that the boy had only a single destiny, to go on to become enlightened as a Buddha. His prophecy was endorsed by Kondanya Brahmin, although some other Brahmins at the naming ceremony prophesied that he might become a universal monarch instead. The prince was named Siddhartha, meaning wish fulfilled, or one who has accomplished his goal. 7 days after the prince's birth, Queen Maya passed away. King Suddhodana had the prince's aunt, Patapati Gautami, bring up the child in his mother's place. King Suddhodana preferred that his son become a universal monarch rather than a Buddha, and went to great lengths to prevent this prince coming into contact with anything that might inspire him to renounce the worldly life of a king. The prince was educated in the famous school of the master Visuamitra until the age of 16, and his father built a palace for each of the 3 seasons to keep him used to the life of luxury. Prince Siddhartha married Princess Yasodhara, also known as Pimpa or Rahulamata. The prince lived a closeted existence behind palace walls, with a life of perfect luxury until the age of 29. One day, the prince was curious to see life outside the palace walls, and on that occasion, he was to bear witness to 4 sights, which were to awaken him to the reality of human life. On his travels, despite the king's efforts to hide these things from him, he encountered an old man, a sick man, and a corpse. These sights saddened his mind and made him realize the uncertainty even of his own life. Nobody had found a way to go beyond aging, sickness, and death. Hope was given to him, however, by the 4th sight, namely an ascetic of serene countenance. The ascetic gave him hope of a path to escape old age, sickness, and death, and from that day forth he set his mind on renouncing the world to become a monk. The day when Princess Yasodhara gave birth to their first child, Siddhartha named him Rahula, meaning a great impediment has come to me, because Siddhartha saw the family life as an obstacle to his ordination. That night, he awoke in the middle of the night. Even the prettiest, most talented dancing girls went asleep and strewn across the floor in the most ugly, shameful, and loathsome positions, snoring with their mouths wide open and grinding their teeth, appeared to him more like corpses than the living. This was the final straw in Prince Siddhartha's quest for renunciation. The prince had his horse Kandaka saddled and went forth from the palace, accompanied by his charioteer Channa, to commence a new chapter for his life as an ascetic. At that time in India, there were many religious teachers. 2 of the best were Alara Galama and Udaka Ramabuddha. Siddhartha studied with both these teachers until he exhausted the full extent of their knowledge. But he knew that all he had learned would still not allow him to reach an end of suffering. Thus, accompanied by 5 companion ascetics, Siddhartha went to the Uruvela district to practice self-mortification without further guidance. His conclusion, after practicing self-mortification in this way for 6 years, was that it was adding to his suffering, not helping him to transcend it. He knew the practices like standing on one leg, starving oneself, or sleeping on a bed of nails could not lead him to reach enlightenment. He thus turned away from self-mortification and started to meditate instead, in earnest. On the full moon day of the 6th lunar month, he was offered 49 cakes of milk rice on a golden tray by a young lady named Sujata from the nearby village of Senani. Having nourished his body back to full strength with the milk rice, he bathed and placed the golden tray into the Naranjara river, with the wish that, if I am to be able to attain enlightenment on this day, may the golden tray float upstream. Miraculously, the golden tray floated out into the middle of the river and then floated upstream for the distance of 80 cubits, before sinking down to the riverbed that was the celestial abode of the Galanaka. Later, he found a suitable Bodhi tree and received 8 handfuls of kusa grass from a man named Sotiya. He placed this grass at the base of the Bodhi tree as a sitting place, and it transformed itself miraculously into a throne 14 cubits wide. The Bodhisattva sat cross-legged on the throne beneath the tree, facing eastwards, and made a solemn vow: for however long it takes for me to attain enlightenment as a fully enlightened Buddha, even if my body should shrivel and die, leaving only skin, sinew and bone, I will not leave this meditation seat. It was not everyone who wanted Prince Siddhartha to reach enlightenment. The god of evil incarnate, known in Buddhism as Mara, would try with all his effort to prevent Siddhartha breaking free of the delusion that imprisoned him in the cycle of rebirth and suffering. Mara threatened Siddhartha as he meditated, accompanied by a myriad troops, intending to make the Bodhisattva waver from his vow to attain enlightenment. The tumultuous roar of the Maras attacking the Buddha was so loud, it sounded like the earth itself would be torn asunder. Mara, mounted upon the great elephant Girimekala, appeared to the Buddha with 1,000 arms, each brandishing various sorts of weapons. Mara's troops were also armed to the teeth, to frighten the Bodhisattva away from his seat. The sight was so terrifying that all the angels in heaven fled to the other end of the universe, leaving the Bodhisattva alone to face the hordes of Mara. Calling as his witness the perfections he had cultivated over innumerable lifetimes as a Bodhisattva, he overcame all fear concerning the hordes of the Maras. They could no longer do anything to make him waver, whether they appeared as terrifying apparitions or conjured up 9 types of storm. They could do nothing to dislodge the Bodhisattva from his resolve, let alone dampen even the merest corner of his robe. Finally, the horde of Maras conceded defeat and fled back to where they had come from, because they were no match for the perfections of the Bodhisattva. Having overcome the Maras, the Bodhisattva sat peacefully and continued to meditate with an undaunted heart. He placed his mind right at the center of the body. When his mind came to a standstill, it became bright inside, opening up an inner pathway known as the middle way, which stood at the equilibrium between overindulgence and asceticism. His mind became successively brighter and purer, until eventually he could attain the inner body of enlightenment within him. Using the body of enlightenment within him, he was able to enter upon successively deeper levels of knowledge. In the first watch of the night, he attained the ability to recall all his own previous lives and previous births, realizing how his good or bad actions had caused him to be reborn in one realm or another. In the second watch of the night, he attained the ability to recall the past lives and previous births of all other sentient beings, knowing how their good or bad actions had caused them to be born in one realm or another. In the final hours before dawn, he attained the knowledge of the Four Noble Truths and could eliminate all of the defilements in his mind to become a fully enlightened Buddha with penetrative knowledge of all things, the culmination of the effort to cultivate good deeds over the course of countless lifetimes. After attaining enlightenment, the Buddha stayed close by the Bodhi tree for a further 7 days, experiencing the happiness of liberation and peace, while contemplating the truths he had just attained with a delightful heart. At the end of 7 weeks, he stayed beneath the Ajapala banyan tree to consider whether the truths he had learned would be too difficult for people in general to understand. His analysis led him to see that the people of the world can be divided into 4 different kinds, depending on their capacity to understand the truth of reality. He compared these 4 types of people to 4 types of lotus, and thereafter decided to teach the truths he had attained for the benefit of those in the world, with a capacity to understand his teachings in their profundity. Recalling his debt of gratitude to those who had formerly been his companions during the time he had practiced self-mortification, his first teaching was to the group of 5 ascetics. He preached to the 5 ascetics in the deer park at Sarnath on the full moon day of the 8th lunar month. His first teaching was called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, or the teaching of the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dharma. At the conclusion of the discourse, the most senior Brahmin, called Kondanya, was able to attain the stages of enlightenment at a level called stream entry. As a result of his attainment, Kondanya requested to become a monk under the Buddha's guidance. Become the first disciple of the Buddha. After a second teaching called the Anatthalakkhana Sutta, or the teaching on the characteristic of not-self, all 5 of the ascetics were able to attain full enlightenment and become monastic disciples of the Buddha. During the 3 months of the monsoon, which the Buddha spent at Sarnath, 55 more became enlightened as a result of the Buddha's teaching. The wealthy householder Yasa and his friends became enlightened after listening to the Buddha's exposition of the progressive sermon and the 4 Noble Truths. Thus, in the first 3 months of the Buddhist dispensation, 60 disciples had become enlightened. The Buddha delegated each of the 60 disciples to propagate the teachings of Buddhism in various places. Subsequently, the Buddha traveled towards Uruvela, preaching to a group of 30 princes along the way, to the point that they were able to become arahants too. After ordaining them and delegating them to propagate Buddhism in various places, he continued to Uruvela, where he was able to win over 3 former fire worshippers called Uruvela Kassapa, Nati Kassapa, and Gaya Kassapa, together with their followers numbering a total of 1,003. By preaching them the Aditta Pariyaya Sutta. Subsequently, the Buddha traveled to Rajagaha in the kingdom of Magadha to teach King Bimbisara and his followers. Apart from reaching the stages of enlightenment as a result of the teaching, King Bimbisara offered a bamboo grove to the Buddha, naming it Veluvana Monastery, which was the first monastery in the history of Buddhism. Buddha was staying at Veluvana, a wanderer called Upatissa had the chance to listen to the teaching of the monk Assaji, attaining the stages of enlightenment. Repeating the teaching he had heard to his companion, the wanderer Kolita, Kolita too was able to attain the stages of enlightenment. Subsequently, these disciples were ordained as the two chief disciples of the Buddha. Upatissa was named Sariputta, and Kolita became known as Moggallana, and persuaded 250 of their former followers to join them. Soon after ordination, all 250 were able to attain full enlightenment. To mark the first 9 months of the Buddha's dispensation, on the full moon day of the 3rd lunar month, the Buddha gave an important teaching to all the monks who had become enlightened as a result of his teachings. The teaching was marked by 4 auspicious factors. Firstly, it was the full moon day of Magha, the 3rd lunar month. Secondly, 1,250 monks came spontaneously to the assembly without any prior appointment. Thirdly, all the monks in the assembly were fully enlightened and had attained the 6th-fold supra-knowledge. Fourthly, all of the monks were given ordination in person by the Buddha. On that day, the Buddha laid the ground rules to be followed in the propagation of Buddhism from that time onward. The teaching also ensured unity amongst the 4 sectors of the Buddhist community, namely monks, nuns, laymen, and lay women, for the perpetuity of the Buddhist tradition. In fact, there are many more details to the life of the Buddha, especially the benefits he had brought to the world during his 45-year-long dispensation. However, for brevity it can be concluded that through his compassion on a daily basis without exception throughout his life, he performed 5 duties for the benefit of the world. In the morning he went on alms round. In the early evening he preached to the public. In the late evening he preached to the monks. During the night he answered the questions of celestial beings, and before dawn he meditated to discover to whom he might bring the maximum benefit by teaching that day. Through the Buddha's determination and the peaceful methods of propagation always used by his disciples, during the lifetime of the Buddha and beyond, Buddhism has spread in India and has been perpetuated throughout the world for more than 2,500 years. Right up to the last minutes of his life, the Buddha continued to teach and act for the benefit of society. His final teaching to his disciples was, "Behold, monks, this is my last advice to you. All component things in the world are changeable. They are not lasting. Work with diligence to ensure your own salvation." The Buddha passed away into Parinibbana at Kusinara on the full moon day of the 6th lunar month at the age of 80, leaving his teachings as his legacy and subsequent authority on Buddhism.